Also have new information tonight that you heard John Roberts ask about the origins of the coronavirus. Multiple sources say this may be the costliest government cover-up of all time by China. The belief now, you heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs asked about it, that the intelligence was inconclusive, but there is a growing belief that the COVID-19 virus originated in the Wuhan lab, not as a bioweapon, but as China's effort to find and deal with viruses to show the world China was as good as or better than the U.S. on that front. It's believed that the virus was bat to human, and then the human, patient zero, worked at the lab, went into the population in Wuhan, and the virus quickly spread from there. China, according to sources, moved quickly to shut down travel domestically from Wuhan to the rest of China, but did not immediately stop international flights from Wuhan. These sources say the World Health Organization was complicit from the beginning, helping China cover its tracks. And that is where we begin tonight. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off. Good evening, John. You asked about this reporting tonight, got something from the president, and obviously part of the reason why the president's coming down so hard on the WHO.
Yeah, there certainly has been a real change in tone from back in early February when the president described the WHO as some of the best and the brightest. Clearly, as this information begins to develop and is beginning to gain more traction now among U.S. officials, the president is changing his mind not only about the WHO, but about what happened in China. I asked him directly the information that you and I had discussed earlier today. He didn't really go down the road of a concrete answer, but he did suggest that he's looking at that, and that is becoming something that the federal government really wants to know a whole lot more about, Brett.
Obviously, China has pushed back about this line. The WHO came out publicly and said they were disappointed in the U.S. decision. But the president appears to be at least warming up to this line of thinking. And really, the origins of this virus become a big, big story if it all pans out as these sources are saying.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And that's why I asked the president the follow-up, because he speaks to President Xi on many, many different occasions. He says he's got a great relationship with him. So I asked the president if in any of the conversations that he has had in recent months with President Xi, or even going back a couple of years, because there is this reporting, which we have confirmed now, that officials from the U.S. Embassy in Beijing visited this virology lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and were concerned enough about a lack of safety protocols there that they cabled back to the State Department that something should happen on this front to tighten up those security protocols. That's why I asked the president if he ever spoke to President Xi about that. The president said, I'm not going to tell you what I told President Xi or talked to him about in regard to the laboratory, but it does sort of indicate that there may have been a conversation there.
Bombshell new reporting from our own Brett Baer. According to Brett's sources, the coronavirus pandemic, we now know, likely originated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is a biological testing lab in Wuhan, China. Now, it gets very sinister. Scientists were studying the coronavirus in bats, and the virus was transmitted from a bat to a lab worker, ground zero, that lab worker. In other words, according to Brett's sources tonight, patient zero was that worker in the Wuhan lab who accidentally became infected with what is now known as COVID-19. That infected worker then went into the population of Wuhan. The virus spread quickly. Make no mistake, if this is now all true in the days and weeks and months that followed, well, we then witnessed what is the single biggest, most deadly cover-up the world has ever seen. Sources telling Brett tonight, multiple sources, that the Chinese government erased data. They destroyed samples. Journalists and doctors disappeared. And China shut down domestic travel to and from Wuhan. But they did not stop international flights to and from Wuhan. In other words, they protected their own country, but were willing to expose the rest of the world, knowing the real risks. Now, that would mean they would need to pay massive financial and political price for this. These actions from China have directly led to widespread suffering and death all over the world. And frankly, if true, what China's government did is frankly just pure evil in our time. And according to Brett's sources tonight, the World Health Organization assisted China's cover-up Well, every single step of the way. And tonight, China and the World Health Organization are now denying the allegations. But as the president said many times, the truth is a force of nature. Here to break this all down for us, his story, the host of Special Report, Bret Baier, is with us. You know, Bret, my question right off the bat. You've gotten these emails. I've gotten these emails. You read social media. I read social media. I've been sent so many of these things. Look at them. I just said it can't be true. It's likely a conspiracy theory. I looked into it. I never saw any evidence. You have evidence tonight. What specific evidence have you uncovered?
Sean, good evening. This is from multiple sources who've been briefed at the beginning part of the origins of China and the beginning of the virus. They've also seen documents open source and classified. We've asked to see those documents directly, but they are saying that it is increasingly likely, there is increasing confidence that the virus, COVID-19, started in that Wuhan lab, not as a bioweapon. Let's just be clear about that. There's no one who's saying that this was a bioweapon.
How would we know that? I mean,
well, we would,
but
they're not saying, these sources are not saying that. They're saying it occurred naturally because China was trying to show that they could be as good or better than the U.S. in handling viruses, discovering viruses, and this was a botched effort to contain this, and it got out to the population. So there's increasing confidence that that's how it starts. They are 100% confident that China altered the data, the statistics. They did a lot of things to contain the information. Meanwhile, they cut down, as you mentioned, travel from Wuhan internally, but left the international flights going. And there obviously is how you have a spread like this. Now, what I think you're going to start to see is more and more officials being obviously asked about this. Secretary Pompeo was on Martha's show tonight, asked specifically about it, and also these documents that U.S. doctors went to that lab a few years ago to inspect it, and through the embassy in Beijing sent back warnings to the State Department saying that this lab was really not living up to standards, and there were warnings about how the lab was operating. I think you're going to see more and more officials say this. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, asked about it, said the evidence was inconclusive, but it looked natural. Again, you can do natural, but still have a botched handling of a virus in one of these labs. And that's what we're getting tonight, Sean.